All right, guys. I know I'm a little bit late on the live, but I just wanted to touch on this topic. I think that we're gonna shift the content a little bit. We are still gonna expose the modern women. That's gonna be normal on this channel. But I just want to I just kind of want to like do it in a certain way that kind of mixes it in with like African affairs, since that is obviously the continent I'm from. And the thing is, we can't really adapt the ways of the the Western society in Africa, because it will produce adverse effects. And I'm going to show some of those adverse effects in this live stream. You know what I mean? The thing is yes, we need to modernize Africa. We need to build infrastructure in Africa. These politicians really need to ride the wave of BRICS, which is being presented to us in Africa. You know what I mean? As a matter of fact, Bank of America is already shaking in their boots, And when you look at it, we need to get away from these old systems. Um, and the thing is they're already they're already afraid. You know what I mean? They're very afraid of it already. Um, and it's gonna happen. It looks like um, it's going to. And I've been saying that. I said this before, and I'll say it again, that that they are going to move to a common currency. That's what they're going to do. They're going to move to a common currency in BRICS. And so the thing is that we're going to, see a shift, and the shift is already happening. Um, and the thing is that they already are saying that BRICS is already bigger than the G7. So this is a step in a good this is a good step in the right direction. And the thing is I really don't even call I really don't even call Bank of America. I actually call it bankruptcy of America. You know what I mean? That's what I call it. And it's going to be good to see that this is going to finally implode on each other. Because the thing is, I want to say about the Western system is that when you look at it time and time again, they're doing the same system. And, you know, the one thing that the thing is, what America does is America is good at marketing. America is good at America is good at marketing itself. You know, that's the thing. It's very, very good at marketing itself to be something that it really is not. The thing is, here's the thing about America is that is that when you look at it, America presents itself as this one utopia of just good things that you can just literally be here and it's going to be all good. That's what America presents itself as, but that's not even the case at all. You know what I mean? Uh, I'll give a perfect example. I'll give the prime example. America, for example, I'm going to be honest with you. America, right, will make America has three, I guess, yeah, three major sports: football, basketball, and baseball, right? The thing is about those, the thing, um the thing is about America, about these sports, is that the reason why they are so popular, okay? This is the reason why they are popular. I'm going to tell you why they're popular to the establishment. The reason why these sports are popular to the establishment is the simple fact that there are a lot of commercial breaks in those sports, okay? Therefore, it's popular. Now, the reason why soccer is not popular in America, and that the level of soccer is not popular in America, and that even the salary of soccer players in America who are not foreign, who are domestic based players, is smaller, is due to the simple fact that it's largely due to the simple fact that there is no way to make revenue from commercials, because soccer has two 45-minute periods, and then it only has one like period of the to make commercials, and that's why it's not popular, because they would want, you know, they would want more commercial coverage, because if they have more commercial coverage, it would mean like more revenue. That's why they, you know what I mean? That's why they want the that's the reason why they would prefer for it to be a commercial heavy sport. But since it's not, they don't want anything to do with it. They don't want to have anything to really do with it. Versus in Europe, that Europe football is the most popular sport, and I'm talking about soccer. And the reason why that is for the simple fact that even if it doesn't have, two like commercial breaks like that, it's just they made that part of its they engraved that basically in the culture. You know what I mean? They engrave soccer in the culture. So what happens is that when people um when like kids even decide that, hey, they want to engage in the sport, um they'll say that, they can go to the football academy, and so this is the reason why it's popular. you know um you even have right now that just appeared to me on my news feed, that one Nigerian millionaire, Aliko Dangote, he's in the talks of buying a soccer club right now. You know what I mean? So I say this to say that um America is just mostly based on profit, 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 and it's just an old formula. And I think that old formula is finally it, you know, I think the old formula has finally kind of like reached its course. So Africa, we can't follow the old formula, because there's no point in following the old formula if it's not doing anything good. You know, if the old formula is not really working, then we might as well not use the old formula for Africa. You know what I mean? Um, I think the new formula is going to work for us, and that one is of self sufficiency. Okay. And I want to just show that the old formula in the West is not working, and that we need not to adapt the ways, um, the ways of the old formula in Africa, because we are going to develop, we are going to do things like that. Um, And so this is what we need to like attack and tackle. So I want to like without further ado, I want to show a few clips, and we'll tie it in with modern women as well. I want to show a few clips of like African countries who are trying not to follow the old formula or the Western formula, but they're being punished for that. I'm gonna go into it real quick. Let me share my screen. Now, I'll say this that this is one of my favorite countries, and I'm biased to this African country. As a matter of fact, it's my favorite East African country for sure. I'm a bit biased because of my affiliation with people from this country, uh, and also this civil war struggle it went through. You know. Okay, let me see. Here we go.
The U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of the Foreign Assets Control recently announced it had imposed new sanctions on the Eritrean Defense Force and the ruling political party, the People's Front for Democracy and Justice. The U.S. says it is targeting Eritrea for its role in the year-long war in neighboring northern Ethiopia. Eritrea's foreign ministry slammed the sanctions, saying they are meant to destabilize the country.
So the thing is I want to keep something in mind. I want everybody to keep something in mind. When you are not going along with the status quo, and this includes on the global scale, then you are going to be in the crosshairs. In my case, like I am not going by I am not one to sit here and say America is the best. I am not one to sit here and say America fights for justice, freedom, liberty, equality. I'm not going to sit here and say that. I'm not going to sit here and say that Americans have the best family values when they don't have any family values at all. This has made me a target. This has made me a target, and it has also like made me receive death threats and things like that. But guess what? I'm willing to die behind my ideas than just conform to the ideas that they are presenting uh in the mass media in America. But let's continue. And the reason why the sanctions happen to places like this is because they don't want to adapt to they don't want to do what the West wants them to do.
More on the effects of these sanctions, I'm joined live via Skype from Washington, D.C. by Joanna LeBlanc, national security law and foreign policy expert. Joanna, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Eritrea is already claiming the sanctions are meant to destabilize the country. How effective do you think these sanctions will go to keep Eritrea out of Ethiopia's internal conflict?
Well, as a result of this sanction, what will happen is that Eritrea will not be eligible for foreign assistance from the United States when it comes to its military. So, what I will anticipate will happen is that more than likely you will have some members of Congress to introduce legislation amendment through the appropriations bill to ensure that Eritrea does not have access to U.S. Financial assistance for the purpose of its military.
So the thing is about that is Eritrea really tries not to use anybody else's money anyway. So the thing is they're what they're doing is they're trying to also keep it from maybe getting other help from anybody else. So this is why they do what they do, as you see here.
Now, Eritrea, which already needs assistance in strengthening its military to protect its borders and its nation from terrorist threats, is now faced with a hard decision in terms of who will Eritrea lean to as a state to ensure and secure financial assistance for its military and also training of its military personnel. So it's rather unfortunate, but unfortunately, the U.S. Deemed that the act of Eritrea's military forces undermine its national security as well as strategic interest in the region and in the country.
So, what do we know specifically about the two individuals mentioned in this announcement? What is their involvement in this conflict?
Well, their involvement is that they have leadership within Eritrea's armed forces, and the U.S. believes that those two individuals have played a key role in promoting the situation between Eritrea and Ethiopia, and also violating human rights and so forth. So they've been targeted, and while it's unfortunate, I think that it's a good thing that the United States did not sanction the entire country. I always push for targeted sanctions versus sanctions on the whole country because we know what happens in those cases. It usually just impact some of the most vulnerable in these various societies. So in this case, targeting two individuals versus the entire country is, while unfortunate, it's a good step in the right direction.
Now, Joanna, do we have any specific information on the two businesses mentioned in this announcement by the Treasury Department, the Hidri Trust and the Red Sea Trading Corporation? What kind of support are they giving in this conflict?
Well, the United States again alleges that those entities and individuals are supporting the supposedly war, civil war in Ethiopia by providing weapons, by providing support, assistance, and by encouraging the engagement of in Ethiopia internal affairs. That's what the United States alleges at this time.
Now, we've seen the United States impose sanctions on other countries for various reasons, including other, Western countries, depending on what the issues are. Generally, how do sanctions work? How effective are they?
Sanctions can be effective and sometimes not so effective. Sanctions are usually imposed, as I said earlier, when the national security interest or the strategic interest of the United States is compromised.
Translation: sanctions are imposed when they're not giving me what I want. That's what that translates to. Okay. When they say that, when they say, okay, the sanctions are because security is compromised, what that translates to is that they're not giving me what I want. Therefore, the best way for me to do is just to economically terrorize them because they aren't giving me what I want. What this is what a sanction is. You know what I mean? This is why this is in essence what that means. It has nothing to do with it has nothing, how should I say, it has nothing to do with security of a country. It has nothing to do with the security of a country. Or it has nothing to do with the security of the United States. Notice that she said United States interests. Okay.
Or perceived to be compromised in the future. Sometimes you have targeted sanctions, you have economic sanctions, you have diplomatic sanctions, you have a host of sanctions. And with those sanctions, sometimes what happens is that visas are canceled, obviously. If you have assets in the United States, those assets are often frozen. If you have houses, you may not have access to those property any longer. And how it happens is that usually the office of the president is responsible for making the decision. Now, you can have the United States Congress, the State Department, and other entities to make recommendations, but ultimately it is the United States president, and then those sanctions are enforced by the U.S. Treasury Department to make sure that perpetrators are indeed held accountable. When I believe sanctions are not effective, when they target countries and economies that are already struggling, that are already crippled due to various reasons. So I am a proponent for individual and targeted sanctions.
But you guys do it anyway, okay? You guys sanction Venezuela, you guys sanction Cuba, and you do it in your words. You say targeted sanctions, but no, You guys place economic sanctions on these places, and yeah, they're struggling economically as it is, but it still doesn't stop you guys from doing it, does it?
Because I think that actual perpetrators of these violations should be addressed, not society's most vulnerable. That should be penalized for the actions of those individuals.
So I want to show another thing, that the reason why the United States hates like Eritrea in particular, and even Rwanda. And he's gonna break it down. He's gonna break it down. We're gonna break all of this down.
This show is always right, and we can predict the future. You might recall that a few weeks ago I covered who the United States might be invading next, or at least creating economic war against. The segment I did with journalist Ann Garrison talked about the U.S. laying groundwork for economic war, and perhaps worse, against Ethiopia and Eritrea. Eritrea is one of the only African countries to say no to America's AFRICOM, our Strategic African Command.
So the thing is, and that's why I say African leaders cut it out, don't do that anymore. And this even relates to African men. African men stop marrying American women. African men stop dating American women. African men leave them alone. Okay. But one trend that needs to stop, that African states do, and they really need to put it into this trend because it's not getting us anywhere, is African states tend to basically, how should I put it? They tend to let the United States set up military bases in Africa, and it's like, yo, cut it out already. You know, we've had enough of this. All right, stop doing that crap. Okay, stop letting Western powers set up bases in your country. Cut it out already.
And we don't like it. And just this week, benevolent warmonger, head of CIA, cutout USAID, and great name for one of the Thundercats, Samantha Power, tweeted out this. Today, the U.S. announced Magnitsky sanctions on the chief of staff for the Eritrean military. Thank goodness America has the moral high ground to judge other countries like this. Sure, someone could at some point notice that the moral high ground we stand on is made up of the bodies of our victims, all neatly piled up together. For now, we'll just keep yelling things from the top of this big high ground we're on. Eritrea has violated human rights. What do you mean? What do you mean? Why is the high ground squishy? It's not squishy. It's perfectly stable high ground. This is perfectly stable high ground. No, that's not a human hand. That's not. That is a starfish wearing a wristwatch. It's high grounds often attract starfish, fleshy starfish that like to tell time. This is not important right now. A few weeks ago, I, along with my guest, said the U.S. would be ramping up war against Ethiopia and Eritrea. And then here we go. They're doing exactly that. This show is always right, and we can predict the future.
When I noticed that on Instagram there was this world of people who are,
And that's one thing about America, is that they'll disguise their sanctions as human rights violations. Okay, that's one thing that America is good at, is that they'll say sanctions, they'll say, oh, they're validating human rights, or oh, they're oppressing their peoples. But then when you look, like, for example, on social media, you see on Instagram, you see like people doing jet skiing and like things like that in the city of Masawa, then that, what I mean? Like this is a fallacy that they're doing. But let's look at um let's go ahead and look at
Just as
something
excited about eating out and finding
something else.
This show.
Puppet organizations became the talk of the town when US started to use these organizations as proxies for various purposes. But now after the failure of its proxy in Ethiopia, USA has itself overtly come out in the Horn of Africa region in order to maintain its hegemony. To know how, watch this video further. Hello and welcome to TFI Global Africa, TFI Global's channel specially dedicated to the cradle of humanity. I'm your host Vedika. Let's begin with the video report. Regardless of the apparent loss of its proxy, the US continues to employ sanctions as a way to have the final say in the ongoing war between Ethiopia and the TPLF. The Tigray People's Liberation Front, a US backed group that brutally ruled Ethiopia from 1991 to 2018.
So I want you to keep something in mind. The United States will use even a rogue vigilante group in order to maintain its interests in a place while basically I want to say while painting the picture that the person that the country that's defending itself against this group is actually in the wrong. This is one of the tactics that America does use. And so with that being said, it will arm people that cause chaos. That's the thing. That's one thing you can count on America doing, is arming people that does cause chaos. Okay. Again, I say we need a modernized Africa. Let's not westernize Africa.
Appears to be on the verge of defeat after a 2-year battle. On October 30, 2022, Ethiopian and Eritrean forces were in charge of the majority of the important cities in Ethiopia's Tigray region. It's unclear as to whether the Ethiopian forces are inside Mekelle, the capital of the Tigrayan region, or have surrounded it. The West, especially the US, has supported the TPLF politically, diplomatically, and narratively throughout the war, and now they are fumbling. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, as well as Western politicians and NGOs, continue to urge for a cessation of hostilities, which appears to be a demand that Ethiopia and Eritrea cease all hostilities before winning. The aggressive and strident propaganda onslaught against Ethiopia and Eritrea escalate daily. Elizabeth Shackelford, a former US diplomat, wrote in the Chicago Tribune, since Tuesday, October 25, 2022, peace negotiations have started in Pretoria, South Africa, and according to Reuters, the TPLF delegation has arrived on a US military plane along with Mike Hammer, the US Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa. This overture of accompanying along further clears the air about who is the master of TPLF. At the anti-West rally held on Saturday in Addis Ababa, placards with "We oppose HR 6600 and S 3199 bills" written had been raised high. These bills are some sanctions which have been hovering over Ethiopia and Eritrea's heads for almost a year. And Garrison spoke to individuals in IDP camps in Ethiopia's Amhara region earlier this year who were aware that the US was threatening them with these sanctions. The House bill is HR 6600 and the Senate bill is S 3199. Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey modified S 3199 to make it even more dangerous than when he first presented it in November 2021. These military and economic support of the West, especially America, to TPLF rightly suggest what we've reported in the past as being true. That is, TPLF is a proxy of the US.
So keep in mind that, and we got to deep dive into this. I don't have no problem with, anybody who doesn't have a problem with me. So it doesn't matter your color or your background or your religion. But if you're shoving ideas down my head and things like that, and you're also willfully being misinformed about what's really going on, then that's when like we'll have a clash, and that's when you'll probably think I'm like a certain way. You'll probably think I'm anti FBA or anti Yankee and things like that. You know what I mean? So what I'm getting at is that you look at this situation right here, and you look at the situation in Sudan, and you realize that the United States is just making a series of proxy wars in these places because I mean, at the end of the day, like we're leaving. Okay, the West always wanted Africa to westernize, but not really modernize. Okay, because here's the thing: like if the West wanted Africa to modernize, then they would send like some people to teach them the things that they need to do to modernize. But they don't do that at all. But China, on the other hand, is sending people to train engineers, to train like people in different fields. But let's continue.
To the overt support of the US in the peace talks and through sanctions now, TPLF is stronger than ever on the narrative front, but not on ground. The surrounding of the capital of the Tigray region by the Ethiopian troops has proved that TPLF is now suffering from an existential crisis, and US has now gone all out after Ethiopia and Eritrea for saving its stooge in the Horn of Africa. America is using its full force in the Horn of Africa because it realizes that it will end with nothing in its hands if there is no Tigray region under TPLF's control where the US can land its military aircrafts. It will end with nothing but a proxy government of the region of Tigray people, which will exist only on the papers of UN and not on ground, and this will set a precedent as to how to kick out the ill Western influence from one's country.
Okay. Let's go ahead and look at the president.
Did you know that you could get $50 to over $150,000 of investment capital at zero?
Those who control the resources, those who have the muscles to impose their own will, are somewhere else, and they have their own interests. We, on the other hand, have our interests. So it's up to you to make a choice. Do you go with them or do you go your own way?
Colonization did not end. It just looks different. In the past, they came to after Africa supposedly changed, but how you might
not allowed to write their own program.
This clip will come back and discuss.
And governments in Africa and elsewhere are not allowed to write their own programs. And when it comes to implementing programs, it deprives you of building institutions and the capacity to implement your programs. You want to build a road, you want to build a school, you want to provide clean water, you want to provide the electricity to the communities everywhere. You have to be able to know. You may not have the capacity, technical, technological, or even financial resources, but you have to build this capacity. Unless you do it on your own, someone else does it. And when you're talking about, say, food security, someone comes and provides you with aid. And then you develop this habit. Every year it's aid. Every year it's aid coming. I mean,
and that's the thing about it, is that we got to stop that habit. All African countries got to stop that habit. I mean, honestly, if I were people, if I were African countries, I would say forget the aid and just don't pay it back. You know what I mean? Just don't pay the aid back, because there's no way you can pay it back. It's always going to just be debt, 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 debt. Okay? So that's what we need to move towards. That's what we need to move towards. Is that, we have to move towards in that direction, because there's no way you're going to be able to pay the debt back, because you keep on incurring debt every year from doing the same things. Okay, it's a system that just really does not work. It's a system that um we need to stop, man, because it's not doing us any good. You see, it's not doing us any good. Okay. And now let's translate that to the modern women in America. Okay. I hate to say it, but the modern woman in America, and including in they live off of debt. You know what I mean? They live in debt. There's one, and she said it proudly. This was the weirdest thing to me. This was the weirdest thing that she said. But she said that she had I want to say $27,000 in debt, and she sounded proud of it. You know, it's like, why are you proud? Why are you proud of being in debt like that? You know, this is not good. You know, debt is nothing to be proud of at all. But let's continue.
It's intentionally or without any intention meant to cripple communities and government. And you have substitutes for government. It's NGOs, it's charities, it's UN agencies.
Yeah, and that's another thing we need to stop doing is these NGOs, okay? This NGO crap needs to stop. Seriously. We got to stop doing NGOs. Okay? It doesn't do us any good to have NGOs.
It's other agencies, consultants who are paid anyway. That makes a big problem. So we said we need to write our own program in the first place. We need to articulate on the projects we write, and we need to have a strategy, a comprehensive strategy, and we need to have detailed plans on how we implement those programs. We need to have budgetary issues addressed. We need to have scheduling of different programs. Unless we do that on our own, we can't possibly imagine that we are achieving any of the goals, millennium or non-millennium. And that, I think, was quite an experience for us. The lessons we have learned are assets for us, even though we need to go a long way. We need to mobilize resources. We need to put in place an infrastructure. We need to develop institutional capacity. We need to educate our people. We need to train our young to be able to work and implement those programs so that we change the quality of life. That never happens in the real world. In the real world, we know now, because those who control the resources, those who have the muscles to impose their own will, are somewhere else, and they have their own interests. We, on the other hand, have our interests. So it's up to you to make a choice. Do you go with them or do you go your own way?
Can't put it better than the president of Eritrea.
So that's the thing. The choice is going to be hard, but we have to go our own way. You know what I mean? And our own way is not to westernize Africa. Our own way is to look at what works for Africa. And I'm going to be honest with you. Nuclear families work for Africa. Grassroots education works for Africa. Going abroad to places where we can bring our skills back to Africa works for Africa, as long as that place has the education that is going to be work for Africa. And I'm going to be honest with you, the United States education system is not really, I'm going to be honest, you know, and I'm a product of the United States education system. I'm going to be honest, like, sometimes I question what the hell were they teaching this black African kid. And what I'm saying is I'm referring to myself, because it's just like I was just like really, like I kind of was, it was kind of weird for me that, you know, certain things that they were teaching, it was just, it just seems like there was an agenda behind even what they were teaching, and I'm like, man, like what the heck is going on here? So, with that being said, um yeah, man, the president is speaking the truth. But let me go ahead and go to um something else. Okay. And I'm focusing on Eritrea because, as you see, the United States education system has failed them. But let's get into one more video about Eritrea being demonized by the West. And it's crazy. Um um it's crazy because the thing is about Eritrea is that it's the most sanctioned country in the West. But let's continue.
Let me put it this way. Eritrea is independent. The US opposes that. That's why it's so demonized, as you explained. But I think its independence is also dangerous in some ways for US interests because it hasn't been subjected to a lot of the kinds of schemes, the sort of capitalist neoliberal schemes that the US has imposed, or imperialist schemes that the US has imposed on a lot of the rest of Africa.
And I want to say something too about that. The thing is about imperialism comes in many forms. Feminism is a form of imperialism. Misandry is a form of imperialism. Sexual liberation is a form of imperialism. Sometimes hypergamy is a form of imperialism. Okay? I'm kind of relaying these facts back to the fact that it's a general defect in American society and Western society as a whole that all of these things are happening right now in this country. That the wedding industry is going belly up. That you see people just as crazy as it sounds, throat cancer is going up because of the lewd and licentious behavior of the modern woman, right? So let's continue on.
It actually has some better social indicators compared to its peers. So I wanted to give you a chance to maybe talk a little bit about that, because people don't get to hear about Eritrea from this context. It's only ever bad Eritrea. Soldiers are everywhere just committing genocide. That's all we hear, literally.
That is all you hear. The other thing you hear is that it's the North Korea of the African continent, which is, it's meant as a slander, but it's also such a backhanded slander to North Korea. The reality is, compared to, say, Chad, the average person living in Chad, living in, Pyongyang would be like living in a paradise. So, I actually think I just wanted to note that at the outset that, you can see Eritrea is more broadly linked to this attempt by Western political forces to demonize nations that are viewed to be aberrant and deviant from the so-called rules-based international order in any significant way. Cuba is the world's worst dictatorship. North Korea is the world's worst dictatorship. Eritrea is the world's worst dictatorship. Venezuela is the world's. Yeah, everyone is the world's worst dictatorship. Only if you hate the United States. But right across the ocean there, from the sea, from Eritrea, is the Gulf, where the entire place is based on forced slave-like labor and massive income inequality and cutting people's heads off and hands off for the most basic of crimes. But that doesn't make you some sort of evil pariah.
Eugene, they're reforming.
Right,
They're
they're reforming.
reforming.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there you have it. Like, but anyway, I say all that to say that I think it's important to recognize, and there are a number of things you could say, but I think one thing that I think is worth noting, in terms of the role Eritrea plays, and certainly the attitude that imperialism has taken towards it, certainly in the context of this conflict, is exactly what was said. I think it was just about a month ago by the Eritrean representative in the conference of the LDCs, the least developed countries. And they made a really important point in the Eritrean contribution that I think speaks very much to this. They said in the entire time, I believe it's 50 years, that the LDC group has existed. And it exists in the context of a range of international frameworks. And the entire time the LDC group has existed, only 2 countries have graduated from the least developed countries. And the Eritrean representative says, why is that? And they go on to say many other things. And I think it's worth reading. It's a very short thing, their presentation there. But I think that in and of itself is key. And you could also see this in the contribution they made to the United Nations General Assembly this year, where they are very clearly stating that the reason some countries are developed and some countries are not is not random, it's not by accident, is in fact by the deliberate policy of the powerful nations, and that they manipulate their power and their control over so many critical levers of the global economy and the broader international community in order to keep this enforced poverty, this enforced underdevelopment as the state of affairs for the whole world. And so obviously, for the point of view of the United States, they hate all countries who point this out. And Eritrea, even though it's never talked about, is one of these countries that points this out. And I think that's one of the main reasons that they have been demonized, isolated, and why, of course, there is a deep fear by the United States and others about what it would mean for Eritrea to play a bigger role, not just in the Horn of Africa, but if they're playing a bigger role in the Horn of Africa and in the state of Africa, and as we can see now as part of the Friends of the UN Charter group started by Venezuela and China, it also starts to break their isolation and allow them to receive more assistance from countries that don't want to tell them exactly what to do. Because one of the main principles in Eritrea is that they don't take aid that doesn't conform to their own development approach, which is to produce, to focus really mainly on the fundamentals and the foundation of the base and build.
And so that's the thing. When you look at the aid that the United States gives like these nations, you wonder, okay, where does it go? Because you see the same lot over and over again, and it's weird to me that, and I completely 110% agree with Eritrea's stance in the sense that, because usually, unfortunately, what happens is what happens is when it comes to like, for example, when it comes to aid being given to these places, what happens is that what happens basically is that when the aid is given, right? When the aid is given to these places, okay, there's usually a stipulation applied to that aid, okay, and that stipulation usually that has nothing to do with actually developing the country. But let's continue on.
Build up from there. So to put sustainability on the table, to put food sovereignty on the table as a major issue, the development of basic education, the development of technical and higher education, the development of healthcare systems. And they've done quite a bit in 30 years of independence. And I want to speak to this in terms of the indicators, but I think it's also important to note the critique that they themselves have raised up about this issue, which is important, not just to Eritrea, but to Venezuela, to Cuba, to other countries that are, developing countries facing big economic challenges, is that it's not just the issue of being underdeveloped. It's that anyone who chooses a development path that, again, doesn't speak to that ascribed role of friend, where you may be seeking you're not seeking enemies in the United States, but you're seeking to improve the living standards and the livelihood of your country and your region in a way that will move you out of the ascribed underdeveloped role that they've set for you. That is, even if you haven't even accomplished it yet, that is a huge challenge, because it's an ideological challenge to the idea that neo-colonialism is the only way that developing nations can approach the way that they engage with the world and the way that they.
And so that's the thing we have to understand, that like when you look at it in Africa, and especially during the Cold War, You know, the United States was trying to win so many sides in Africa. Luckily, my country aligned itself with the socialist bloc, you know, Cuba, China, Vietnam, um, the USSR. You know what I mean? Luckily, it did that. But other countries did not do that in Africa. You know, other factions in other countries didn't do that in Africa. And so that's the thing. When we look at the situation we're in right now, this is very much not only an economic warfare, but it's an ideological warfare as well. You know, and so that's why we have to take it upon ourselves and we do have to go our own way. You know, even if Italy doesn't like it, even if America doesn't like it, even if Britain doesn't like it, even if France don't like it, who cares?
Engage with the world economy. Now, I hope you don't mind I look at my notes here for a second because I want to get this right, because I do think
Please.
that this is an important issue in terms of how you look at country, because if you're going to say someone is the worst of the worst, and that's why I raised up that issue of North Korea, some would say DPRK, compared it to Cuba, compared it to Venezuela, because there's a similar issue here where the countries are listed as the worst of the worst and all these different things. And then when you actually start to look at the numbers, they in fact are not the worst of the worst. So just throw a few things out here for you that I think people would be relevant. And again, sorry for looking at my notes, but again, I want to get it right about Eritrea here. Eritrea has a higher literacy rate than Pakistan, Nigeria, Egypt, Mali, Niger, and Sudan.
Okay. So there you have it. You have this country, right? In Nigeria, I hate to say it, but you're gonna have to cut ties with the West as well. And you're gonna have to also cut ties with Britain too. That's one thing you're gonna have to do, you know. But here you have a country that is basing itself on self-sufficiency. And not only is it trying to become self-sufficient, but it's actually more literate. It's a more literate society. Okay. I noticed the countries that like historically have aligned with Cuba or had something to do with Cuba at one time or another are usually more literate.
They have a higher life expectancy than Nigeria, South Africa, Angola, Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique. Now, I want to just reiterate some of what I just said. In the first two, that they have a higher literacy rate than Nigeria, that they have a higher life expectancy than Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the richest nations on the planet Earth. There's no reason why people are living in abject poverty all across that country. And that right there should tell you something, because Nigeria is one of America's best friends on the African continent.
There you go. Nigeria, cut it out. Join BRICS so we can stop this, okay? And that's the thing about, like, especially if we equate this with modern women, stop trying to be their best friends, okay? They're not going to change the way they feel about you. They're already hell bent in feeling a certain way about you. And the more that you understand this, the better you are able to equip yourself to keep it moving, okay? Stop trying to be friends with them. It's not going to work, okay? It really is not going to work. And that's the same with African nations. Stop trying to be friends with the United States. What has it really gotten you? Okay? Let's just be honest. What has it really, really gotten you trying to be friends with the United States? Let me know.
And has been for some time, and their social indicators are shameful. Their use of resources, the income inequality, the looting, the kleptocracy, shameful conditions for people of Nigeria. Lower life expectancy than Eritrea, lower literacy rate, and you never hear anything that's said about Eritrea said about Nigeria. And that's not a huge knock on other African countries, but I think it's important. Also, Pakistan, Pakistan obviously has many development issues, but lower literacy rate than Eritrea, lower life expectancy than Eritrea. When you look at access to improved drinking water, this is a big issue in Eritrea. It's one of the main things that they're working on is access to water, access to more sanitation facilities. I think it's something like 54% of villages now, or communities, are open defecation free, which is, a big thing that was celebrated this year by some of the UN agencies that Eritrea had accomplished. And that's a big thing. So improved drinking water, that's a huge issue. That's something that they're focusing on. So more people in Eritrea have access to improved drinking water. Safely managed water. This is a different one. Similar sort of stat, but more people in Eritrea have access to safely managed water, so clean water, than Nigeria, Pakistan, Congo, Brazzaville, and Peru. So again, there you go. Yet again, you look at the issue of infant mortality. There's a lower infant mortality in Eritrea than in Nigeria, India, Pakistan, Mali, Zambia, Benin, Burkina Faso, Sudan, Uganda, and Chad.
So you also heard him say that Peru, he mentioned even a Latin America country that is doing well in. Okay.
And there is a higher employment to population ratio, which is basically the number of people who are of working age that are actually working rather than just sitting around idle and unemployed, than Nigeria, South Africa, Pakistan, El Salvador, and Colombia. So I am not
when you mentioned.
So the thing is, and this is what the West doesn't want you to know, Africans are fully capable of doing it, of doing the darn thing. Okay? And it's the same thing with these women too. They think that we're not capable of running the show when we're more than capable of running it. Okay. The problem is that they just have put in their head that we're not capable because they were jockeying to run the show themselves. Okay. This is where we're at with this situation. Well, let's continue.
A lot of the countries that you're mentioning are very strong U.S. allies. Again, I just think that's a really important thing to note. But continue.
There are also more primary age school children in school in Eritrea than in Pakistan or Nigeria. But I say all that to say, not that everything's perfect. I would not say that. The government would not say that. And in fact, I mean, if you don't believe me, you can just go look at the government-produced documents from Eritrea, where they actually talk quite a bit, not just about their successes, but about their challenges, about the attempts to address climate change, have sustainability, and have food sovereignty in a country that, in fact, because of the nature of the geography, only has limited access to water. They built something like 700 dams, by the way, since 1991 to help manage water and manage agriculture. About the need, you read an article that say, well, we've done a great job bringing in more doctors, but we still haven't done enough. So no one is claiming that that it's not a developing nation. It's obviously in the LDC group. It's growing from a very low base. It's only 30 years old as a country. It's emerging from almost 30 more years of essentially guerrilla-based conflict, and it's in an area that already was economically depressed due to the nature of the structure of the global economy, and that in and of itself faces its own, relative challenges to that sort of geographical reality. So no one is trying to make any, wild claims here. But when you look at what they have done in that 30 years, obviously around some of the key human social indicators that we look to all around the world to determine how people are doing, they're doing significantly better than countries that are best friends with the United States and receive huge sums of money and all sorts of trade preferences from them that Eritrea is totally excluded from. And what is the difference? The difference to me seems very clear, that Eritrea is pursuing a development path that is based on more equitable development, based on a more social justice type approach to not having huge income inequality and huge differences between the rural areas and the urban areas, that's seeking to build a strong foundation to grow a strong economy up from. And we've seen, if you look at a country like, say, China, I mean, that's a big sense of why China is successful now, is they spent the first 40 or so years of the country building up a very strong foundation, a very strong base. And, ultimately, these types of politics and politics that they're willing to call this out on the international stage in terms of what is really going on in the broader situation, I think is something the U.S. hates. But I think it deserves much more credit. It deserves much more focus. There is much more that I think people should see and know about what's going on there. And there's a lot to be said for other African nations that are at a similar level of development, other nations around the world, but especially in Africa, which is a continent that has been forced into brutal, humiliating neocolonialism, about how to really build up an equitable economic, social substructure as we go into the 21st century. I think many of the questions there, you look at the other small country that's considered, relatively successful economically is Rwanda. Rwanda is the opposite, right? It's sort of the U.S. imperialist satrapy approach to what 21st century African development should be. I think Eritrea is offering some different answers to some similar questions that I think deserves a closer look. And I think, again, as you can see from those social indicators, already with almost none of the similar resources compared to a country like Nigeria that's ultra rich, none of the similar resources as many of these other countries that are getting unlimited aid from the United States and still delivering terrible social indicators, that they've been able to transcend that and get over some of these in important areas. And I think that deserves to be said and it deserves to be recognized.
So there you have it. You know what I mean? Like, and this is something America will never tell you. You know what I mean? And it goes back to the fact that when you look at when you look at, for example, I'm going to say, look at the example of modern women, right? They'll never tell you that they're alcoholics. They'll never tell you that they're on antidepressants. They won't show you what's really going on behind closed doors. They only present themselves as a certain ways. They'll only present themselves in a certain way that shows that they're living their best life, that they're living it up, and things like that. And they're not showing the deeper things that are happening. And I believe that's kind of like the same thing that's happening with these developing countries, okay? And Eritrea is one of the developing countries, and it wants, as you see, it wants to keep its own culture. It is a multi-tribal society, multi-ethnic society, and it wants to stay that way. But unfortunately, the West has the problem with it staying that way. For some reason, I don't know why that. I don't know what the issue is with it. With the West having an issue with it wanting to develop itself, But let's continue. And so what I'm going to show too is that America will gaslight conflicts, okay? And when they gaslight these conflicts, it just leads to different things happening. But what I want to do is something was brought to my attention. This is off of the African continent, and this is with a staunch U.S. ally that I guess they don't see the writing on the wall. Let's say this. Let's look at this real quick.
I can remember exactly where my epiphany was.
Okay.
Hadn't thought much about it, to tell you the truth. And I was a senior in high school, and my dad was dropping me off. I remember about to get out of the car, and I looked to my right, and two well-dressed men in suits kissed each other. I mean, they gave each other a kiss. And then one looked like he was heading to the DuPont building, and one looked like he headed to the Hercules Corporation building. And I'll never forget, I turned and looked at my dad. He said, Joey, it's simple. They love each other.
That's preposterous. Joe Biden is not a young man. He was a senior in high school in 1960 or 1961, or supposedly back then. He saw well-dressed men openly kissing on the sidewalks of Wilmington, Delaware, and this had such a big effect on him. But 36 years later, he was still voting for the Defense of Marriage Act. He didn't come out in favor of gay marriage until 52 years later. Mr. President, you're talented, fabulous, but please don't insult our intelligence.
So whatever sounds right, that's what he does. All right, let's see. I'm trying to find something. I don't know if they have it yet. I can't find it. Yeah, I can't find it. But there was something that said that like Biden was going to give 500,000 US dollars for LGBT education in Pakistan. Something like that. I don't think I can find it though. Yeah, I don't think I can find it. Yeah, I can't find it.
Billionaire Ray Dalio believes in 3 simple words: cash is trash. So where might be a better option?
Was there an Algerian nation before French colonization? That's the question French President Emmanuel Macron reportedly asked. The statement has angered Algeria. But what's behind this? And what does it tell us about France's colonial past? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Imran Khan. France and Algeria have had a complicated relationship for decades. Although French colonial rule ended in the 1960s, France has often been accused of interference in Algeria's affairs. And President Emmanuel Macron's...
I hate to say it, but in every French former colony, there will be interference by France. They never let it go. They never let it go, and they never wanted to let it go. But it was just the will of the people was too strong. But unfortunately, they still found a way to keep it under their control.
Recent critical comments about Algeria's politics and history are threatening to make things worse. The Algerian government has responded to the latest remarks by recalling its ambassador to France and banning the French military from its airspace. French military aircraft fly through Algeria to reach troops helping the fight against armed groups in the Sahel.
Which is a lie, because I'm going to be honest, Russia has done more effective work than France ever did when it came to these armed groups in the desert, when it came to these jihadist groups. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu. France has not did squat when it came to these armed groups in the desert. You know, so this is like what I'm talking about, is that, you know, France has been very ineffective. And so that's good that Algeria takes a stance like that, yo, you're not going to fly through my airspace, bro. That's very, very good. You know, this is very, very good.
Algeria says Macron's comments are an inadmissible interference in its internal affairs and an intolerable affront to Algerians who died fighting French colonialism. Now, Macron's remarks were reported by the French daily newspaper Le Monde. It says that they were made during the president's meeting with descendants of Algerians who fought for France in the 1954-1962 war for independence. Macron is quoted as saying, Algeria is ruled by a political military system, describing the country's official history as having been totally rewritten, while adding, you can see that the Algerian system is tired. It's been weakened by the Hirak. That's a reference to the pro-democracy movement that ended Abdul Aziz Bouteflika's nearly 2-decade rule in 2019.
And the only reason why they're mad is that Abdul Aziz Bouteflika pretty much did everything that France wanted him to do. That's why they're talking in this way.
He's also quoted questioning the existence of the Algerian nation before French colonial rule. Now, Algeria says that more than 1 million people were killed in its war for independence. It started in 1954 when France cracked down on rebels from the National Liberation Front who were fighting for independence. The French government has faced accusations of committing large-scale killings, systematic torture, and crimes against humanity during that conflict. Emmanuel Macron acknowledged some of the atrocities in 2018, but the French government has never apologized to the Algerians about its actions during the war that ended in 1962. The tension with Algeria worsened after France sharply reduced the numbers of visas it grants to Algerians. Tunisia and Morocco are also affected. The French government blames the nation's failure to allow the return of undocumented immigrants in France for its decision. The dispute is raising concerns about France's relationship with its other former colonies in Africa, including Mali, Chad, Ivory Coast, and Niger.
The main thing is this is the thing. The main situation which Europe is afraid of and the United States is afraid of is they're afraid that these things will create a domino effect. That's what they're really afraid of, okay? They're afraid of a domino effect that will occur. And, because of that, they don't want anybody else getting any ideas, okay? That's the whole issue. That's the whole situation that we are facing right now, okay?
Let's bring in our guests. In Paris, Bruno Tetre, Deputy Director of the Foundation for Strategic Research. In Doha, Youssef Bouandel, Professor of Political Science and International Relations at Qatar University. And in Casablanca, Adama Gaye, a journalist and author. Welcome to the program. Let me begin in Doha first with Youssef Bouandel. Youssef, the former colonizers, whether it's Britain, whether it's France, seem to have very complicated relations with the former colonized. In France's case, what used to be a relationship of take, very simply put, has been very difficult to retool, particularly in modern times. Do you think that's an accurate representation of what's going on?
Udemy. No matter how you say it, it's the top online learning destination with thousands of courses.
Around the world, we're helping people achieve.
Well, it's almost accurate. I think that over the last 2 years or so, there has been a hope that relations between Algeria and France might improve, especially under the leadership of current President Emmanuel Macron. He opened up few windows of hope when, for instance, he talked about colonialism as a crime against humanity in general. He instructed Benjamin Stola, the French eminent professor of history of Algerian descent, to start some sort of a dialogue with the Algerians and open up the memories. The heads of so many Algerians who were killed by the French were returned to Algeria. This showed that certain steps would be taken towards at least opening up one of the most taboo subjects in the love-hate relations between Algeria and France. But events over the last couple of weeks and certainly over the last few days have put everything in jeopardy. That I think the Algerians were not expecting the French President Macron to come up with these particular statements. And I guess that even the French president did not think that Algeria would give such a robust answer to what they have done by closing the Algerian airspace to French military jets operating in Mali.
In Paris, Bruno Tetre, is this a simple diplomatic spat, or is it, as our guest in Doha says, a miscalculation of comments by Macron that's led to a very serious incident?
I think it's somewhere between the two. Just a little bit of context for your viewers. These reported statements by Macron were actually happened during a meeting, an informal meeting with some French Algerians and Algerians of the younger generation. So it was a free-flowing conversation. But throughout this conversation, it was clear that Macron expressed a frustration or a disappointment after, according to him, having tried to reconcile the narratives of French history and Algerian history, and after, according to him, having genuinely tried to make some gestures towards the Algerian leadership. Now, his conclusion, his main conclusion, the one that has been that has made Algiers very angry, is that the system, what he calls the system, cannot be reformed, and that the generals the Algerian generals have instrumentalized their history to their own political benefit. And that's even though he does have a good relationship with his Algerian counterpart, the Algerian president. So this was not calculated, but this happened just after the three Maghreb countries were subjected to new procedures regarding visas for coming to France. And that included, of course, Algeria. So that probably added up to his comments of a few days ago.
Bruno, I just want to confirm, you're saying that these were off-the-cuff comments in a private meeting? Can I just confirm that that's what you're saying?
No, I'd like to confirm that these were off-the-cuff remarks, but in a semi-public meeting. This was not a speech, but these were not off-the-record comments.
Yusuf Boandel, they were off-the-cuff remarks. They were simply having a conversation. There's no reason for the Algerians to get so angry. Or those off-the-cuff remarks, are they simply French arrogance?
Well, I think that we need to distinguish between two friends or a group of people having.
It was French arrogance, by the way. Of course, it was French arrogance. Yes, for sure.
A coffee in the Champs-Élysées, and the French president talking to some youth of Algerian descent. Whatever Macron says, let's not forget that he is the president of France, and I do not necessarily believe that Macron's frustration about the Algerians is due to his frustration about making up some overtures to the Algerian regime, and Algerians are not responding. I think it's much more serious than that, and to my view, or in my opinion, it deals also with the French operations in Mali. Let's not forget that the Algerian government has changed its constitution, whereby it can deploy its military for the first time since 1973 overseas. This particular article of the constitution was not very, very popular among Algerians. A lot of people in Algeria saw it as an attempt by France to get the Algerian military involved in Mali. Last June, Macron said.
And sometimes they'll do that. They'll use one African country against another, and this is something that we need to stop, and we need to really take a back seat in. Sometimes what happens though is the fact that one of the fact of the matters is sometimes that country that they use the other African nation against, sometimes that country has a interest that can be gained if they decided to follow along and go with what America is trying to do, or what France is trying to do, or any of these Western nations are trying to do, basically.
That the Operation Barkhane in Mali would end soon, and it will be under an international coalition. They expected the Algerians to be involved in that, and they were not. Okay. The second thing that, like your guest from Paris said, it has to do with visas to a certain extent. But let's not forget, last month, on the 20th of September, Emmanuel Macron apologized to the Harkis, to those Algerians who fought with France during the Algerian War of Independence, and even decorated some of them. This particular action was not very well received in Algeria. I guess that the Algerians did not want to send their military to Mali in support of the French actions, and that resulted in these particular comments, which were reported by Le Monde, which is one of the most influential newspapers in France and in the French-speaking world.
Adama Gay, I will come to you in just a second, but I want to come to Bruno again just to get a reaction to those comments. What do you think?
Well, I don't entirely disagree. What I think Macron is trying to do, but it's a very delicate balancing act, is what he calls the reconciliation of narratives and the reconciliation of memories. So you have the Harkis in France, you have the young people, Algerians or French Algerians. And then you have the relation with the Algerian government. So it's a very difficult triangulation act. And I think he is actually honest in what he says to each of them. But maybe it's impossible to do this reconciliation. Maybe it will take another generation. Just a quick comment on the question of Mali. So far, these questions have been largely disconnected. There is what we do and don't do with Algeria in the Sahel, and there is the question of reconciling the narratives. Now, of course, politics is politics, and it's difficult both for Paris and Algiers to separate the two. What I do know for sure is that there has been an increasing frustration in Paris for what is perceived, rightly or wrongly, as a lenient attitudes by Algiers regarding some jihadi movements which are freely crossing the borders. And so the retaliation for Macron's comments, which is about forbidding the overflights of French aircraft by the Algerian government, actually is a very symbolic act. It's like recording the ambassador, because it doesn't change, it doesn't impede our operations in the Sahel. But it's a very symbolic act indeed, and it's not a good thing in any case for the Sahel.
Thank you for being so patient, Adama, in Casablanca. One of the questions I want to ask you is very simple. A lot of
So another thing too is he's probably a professor in Casablanca. One thing I want to say is that there's this gross misconception that there's this like anti-black sentiment in the majority of the Maghreb. Now I will say that Tunisia, yes, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, Tunisia definitely. But as you see, I'm pretty sure that this professor is probably teaching in Morocco, and he's as dark as they come. So that narrative, for some reason, this seems to be a big time narrative. The narrative of just this constant anti-blackness in these places is kind of weird, because if that was just always the case, then I think like people would leave. But let's continue.
This is historical. It's the way the former colonizers have treated the formerly colonized. And there's a lot of accusations that although actual rule has stopped, interference from the former colonizers hasn't, and that's led to frustration and anger on all sides. Is that right?
I really believe a great photograph, a great piece of art, a great film, it makes you feel viscerally alive. It makes you feel an emotion. And unless I really viscerally feel this.
Look, I think we are in a situation whereby we must acknowledge that despite the many criticism that can be leveled against Mr. Macron for his meddling of his country into African affairs, his willingness to control the monetary and economic possibilities of the former colonies, like West African Francophone countries, and of course Maghreb countries. The fact is that in this situation, one has to acknowledge that in Algeria, Mr. Macron has tried to put some points, very important, really across in a positive way, in a way that indicates that there is a willingness to reopen the old wounds and fix them. But what we have here is, on the one hand, the Algerian government, and indeed, that is very strong in refusing to acknowledge its shortcomings. Indeed, I believe Mr. Macron's words, even though they are tough from a head of state, they were right. The government in Algeria is controlled by the military, and they have not been allowing the people of Algeria to move towards democratization, to move towards an economic modernization, to ensure that they can bring peace to their neighborhood.
No, I don't believe that. And I think, like, as a matter of fact, that's the narrative that often gets pushed about Algeria. And it's the same thing with these places, because the thing is about Algeria, there's nothing wrong with having, like, let's just say, like, a military type government. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with that. However, for some reason, the usual players will make you out to be a villain for having this type of system in play there. It's very weird to me why they do it, but for some reason they do it. I don't know why. You know,
Instead, they've been fighting with everybody, closing airports, airlines, Moroccan planes, closing them for French airplanes, etc. So this is a problem from the Algerian, and they need to look at themselves in a mirror and address their own internal challenges. This cannot be continuing because the country is backsliding when you compare them with neighboring other nations that are really progressing against what Algeria has been going downward, despite its natural resources, gas and others, that they have not yielded.
Adama, let me be absolutely clear. Are you saying then that the French president shouldn't interfere in Algeria's affairs because Algeria is a sovereign state and the sovereign state needs to sort out its own problems?
What Mr. Macron said, he is entitled to say it. The world where people remain behind nation states and control their frontiers, their borders, this era is gone. You have to accept that other people will look at your state and talk about it. And Algerians also, sometimes they talk about France and they're entitled. The other aspect I would like to highlight here is this. This is politics.
Let me put that. Adama, let me put that to our other guests in Paris and in Doha. Let's begin in Paris first. A lot of this then is to do with internal politics within France. Macron is facing a very tough right-wing challenge in these elections that are coming up. There's an increasingly feeling in France from a lot of observers I've been speaking to over the last couple of days that what is happening is actually Macron is being dragged to the right wing when it comes to immigration, when it comes to visas and things like this, and he's having to play on the right wing playing field rather than a more level playing field, perhaps.
I think this is not entirely false, and clearly Macron has been, who appeared as a center-left and center-right candidate in 2016, has indeed been dragged slightly to the right. But I would caution those trying to second-guess the government's, the president's actions on that, like I would caution anyone about second-guessing politicians. We always suspect politicians to do everything for domestic political reasons. Well, they may have a point, but this particular conversation that was reported by Le Monde, which made a big splash, I don't think it gains him any points in terms of domestic political benefits. Again, knowing a little bit how he operates, I don't underestimate that for him, there is a genuine frustration at not being able to go beyond the old historical grievances by Algeria. Now, does he make political calculations in addition to that? Perhaps so, but I would caution against putting everything on the forthcoming presidential campaign.
Yusuf Wandel, I'd like to get your comment.
Let me see something else. Hold on. The real reason France made this comment is because of this.
Forget Amazon. The best side hustle to start in 2022 is by leveraging Google and artificial intelligence.
This year, Algeria is marking its 60th anniversary of independence. Well, to talk more about Macron's visit to Algeria, let's bring in Todd Shepard, a professor at Johns Hopkins University and the author of a book on the Algerian War. Todd, thanks for joining us. This is Macron's second visit to Algeria since he first became president 5 years ago. How is this trip being seen in Algeria today?
This time, I think it's seen as a real boost again for President Tebboune of Algeria. Algeria is in a particularly strong position right now. You represent key executives from Total, the French gas and oil company that you just mentioned, that are caught up in helping the Russian army, are part of this trip because Algeria is France's biggest supplier of gas. The European Union is putting pressure on members like Spain to make things better with Algeria. So Algeria, which was really in a rough state a few years back, with the Hirak, a significant movement, with the kind of convalescence and coma of its president at the time, President Bouteflika, who was Macron famously or infamously left the hospital room where he visited Bouteflika, who we think was in a coma, and explained that he'd learned many political lessons from then President Bouteflika. The Hirak pushed Bouteflika out. Algeria was in a very weak position. Algeria was devastated by COVID and other things. Right now, with gas prices rising, with Europeans, particularly the French, really needing Algeria, not just to counter the effects on the energy.
Now, I want you to keep something in mind that he said. French needing Algeria. Ironically, Algeria doesn't need the French. Okay? Yes, Algeria does need better governance. Yes, Algeria does have a lot of corruption, okay? As does every African country. But when you find out that African countries don't need Western countries, then the game changes, okay? What African countries need is the tools needed to develop self-sufficiency and sovereignty, okay? That's what African countries need. But no, they do not need European nations. It's the other way around.
Energy markets in Europe, produced by Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, but also by French troops being kicked out of Mali, and the kind of disorganization of the anti-terrorist campaigns on Algeria's southern borders. Algeria as a country is in a really strong position. Algeria is making a lot more money now because of the gas prices. So this is seen as a moment for Algeria to shine. This is definitely seen as a moment when the French should step up and speak to and address not just economic concerns, what they can get from Algeria. Algeria is, of course, hoping, many Algerians are particularly hoping, and the President Tebboune in particular, that there'll be some further efforts on the French part to explicitly address their implication in governing Algeria for 132 years, occupying it, killing hundreds of thousands of Algerians, that kind of really deep, tense colonial relationship that has really troubled relationships between the two countries since Algeria won independence 60 years ago last month. In July of 1962.
President Macron has long ruled out issuing, though, an apology for colonialism. He has made a series of gestures that are aimed at healing past wounds. Do you really think he needs to explicitly apologize?
His gestures have been primarily addressed to French people. Everything he's done, for the most part, around Algeria, I think a lot of Algerians and most serious historians would say before he was elected president, that it was a crime against humanity what France did in Algeria. when he's made certain claims and signaled his interest in taking seriously this history. People think that's important, but what he's actually done, like most of what he does, is kind of political maneuvering. And it's been primarily addressed at memory wars within France itself. And like the usual way that French politicians, Sarkozy was a real pioneer in this, President Sarkozy, using attacks. You mentioned some of those in the introduction to the piece. Algeria didn't really exist as a nation. Algerian leadership just takes advantage of its history with France to perform things. He's done that too, to perform for French audiences. If he actually wants to speak to Algerians this time, it doesn't have to be in the form of an apology, I would suspect, but something where it's actually taking seriously Algerians as interlocutors, as equal interlocutors, as people that have their own stakes, their own history, and their own sense of dignity and want to be respected, as any country would. That's an opportunity for him. To reduce everything to apologies is a trick that he plays that feeds into the far right and far right campaigns around these issues. And he's done that a lot. But this is an opportunity for him.
All right, Todd, thanks for sharing your expertise with us. Todd Shepard there, professor at Johns Hopkins University. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Here's another reason why Algeria is not really in the good graces of I want to say of the West, and also of America in particular.
توجد في الجزائر مناطق كثيرة جافة قليلة الأمطار يعاني سكانها من شح مياه الشرب والري. في ثمانينيات القرن الماضي بدأت الشركات الصينية في مساعدة الجزائر على بناء منشآت الري الكبرى. فتم على التوالي بناء برج المياه في العاصمة الجزائر بسعة 2500 متر مكعب، ونظام ري يشمل 3 هكتارات من الحقول الزراعية، ومشروع مياه الشرب للجزائر العاصمة وتيزي وزو والمدن ما بينهم. إن الجزائر أكبر الدول الأفريقية مساحة ورابعها اقتصادا، كما أنها أول دولة عربية أقامت علاقات شراكة استراتيجية شاملة مع الصين.
So the thing is, we have to look at partnerships, right? And just basically outright, I want to say just outright exploitation. And I'm not going to lie, China at first did not have it right. China just kind of like lightweight went over there and they thought, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and you're going to have to deal with it. And there's nothing you can say or do to keep us from doing that. I'm not going to lie, China did have that in their head, okay? I'm not going to sit here and cap. China at one time did think like that, okay? But they corrected themselves. I can't even lie. They have corrected themselves in terms of how they deal with us,
للعلاقات الصينية الجزائرية أساس سياسي متين، يكمل البلدان بعضهما بعضا اقتصاديا، وأمامهما آفاق واسعة للتعاون. في شهر ديسمبر من عام 2017 تم في مركز شي تونغ لإطلاق الأقمار الصناعية بالصين إطلاق قمر الاتصالات رقم 1 للجزائر على متن صاروخ لونج مارش 3C وضعه في المدار المحدد، وذلك في أول مشروع مشترك بين البلدين في مجال الطيران. ويستخدم القمر الجزائري بشكل رئيسي في مجالات الإذاعة والتلفزيون والاتصالات عند الطوارئ والتعليم عن بعد والحكومة الإلكترونية. وأنجز في عام 2018 مشروع الطريق السريع الجزائري الذي كانت الصين مسؤولة رئيسية عن بنائه، يربط الطريق الذي يبلغ طوله 1216 كيلومترا بين 24 ولاية جزائرية. كما يبحث البلدان إمكانية التعاون في مشروع الميناء الضخم الجزائري، وأيضا في مجالات الطاقة الجديدة وتركيب السيارات والسياحة والمال، في حين حققت التبادلات الثقافية بين البلدين نتائج جديدة باستمرار.
阿尔及利亚的这个地理位置非常优越，它的这个基础设施呢也相对的比较完善，政局呢也长期保持稳定。
Now, the thing is about China, and this is one thing you will notice about China, is China goes to places where China goes to places where things are already kind of like just set up in a way. Like, for example, like they don't really go to places where they'll have to pick someone up by their bootstrap. You know what I mean? They kind of go into places that are already developed or on their way to development. That's why you don't hear like any projects in, for example, Chad. You don't hear any projects in places like Niger. You know what I mean? Because these places leave a lot to be desired,
在“一带一路”合作过程当中，连接欧洲和非洲的中间站和非洲桥头堡的一个作用。
Got a technical background? Looking to go remote and get paid more? Become a software engineer.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Well, good news for the second club, bad news for the first club. First club, United States, second club, China, India, BRICS, Russia. And what's the good news or the bad news, however you want to look at it, is Algeria. The president of Algeria will land in Moscow and meet il Presidente Putin. All right, so this article comes from Al Mayadin, and it is from November 11th, 2022. Algeria. Tebboun's, I think that's why you would pronounce his name, Tebboun. Tebboun's visit to Moscow to mark start of new stage in ties. Well, Mr. Tebboune, Tebboune, Tebboune. I will call him Tebboune, okay? Now you don't like it. Whenever I say it, you say, hey, stop. All right, so Algerian Foreign Minister, Ramtane Lamara, this is my pronunciation, reveals that preparations are underway for President Abdelmajid Tebboune visit to Russia. Well, if he's going to make it, you know what I mean? A lot of things could happen in the meantime, if you know what I mean. Algerian Foreign Minister Ramtane Lamamra announced Friday that preparations are underway for President Tebboune visit to Russia, not noting that Algerian side hopes the visit will take place before the end of this year. I'm going to say the president, okay? I'm not going to use his last name anymore because I don't like how it sounds. I don't think I pronounce it right, and I know I don't like how I sound. God damn it. And I'm quoting, Algeria and Russia are important partners for each other. La Mambra stressed in a press statement on the sidelines of the Paris Peace Forum. We maintain, I'm quoting, we maintain a high-quality political dialogue, and we hope that the visit of President to Russia will mark the beginning of a new stage in our relations, La Mambra said. Earlier in May, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Moscow and Algeria plan to sign an agreement confirming a new quality of bilateral relations between the two sides. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov announced on Tuesday that Russia welcomes Algeria's desire to join the BRICS economic bloc. So these guys are all in. The Algerian Foreign Ministry's Special Envoy for International Partnership, Leila Zarouki, told Al Shorouk newspaper that Algeria formally applied on Monday to join the Economic Association. Following the application submission, Algerian president is expected to inform Moscow of a suitable schedule to pay a visit and meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Russian minister indicated that given, and I'm quoting, the rapidly developing friendly ties between Russia and Algeria, the two countries plan to sign, and I'm quoting, a new interstate strategic document which will reflect the new quality of our relations. Well, let me think. Algeria has a...
So, the West doesn't want to see any country, for that matter, have bilateral ties with Russia or China, for that matter. The thing is, I think these countries recognize, I think a lot of these countries recognize, be it Venezuela, be it like Nigeria, be it India, they're starting to recognize that basically being a part of the West is a bad deal. Okay? And just being pegged to that Western dollar is a bad deal. They all historically have had the same lot with trying to be goody-goody with the West. It just doesn't work out for them. They end up getting the short end of the stick, of course. So now there is an alternative that they're all money in.
Over there, what will I have? They will have what? Spain? What can they have? Spain and Portugal, France, right across. Anyway, it is worth mentioning that Russian President Vladimir Putin said in 2020 that he hoped the president of Algeria would visit Russia. Algeria is among Russia's 3 major trade partners in the African continent. Algeria abstained from voting on the UN resolution condemning Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. After the United States, Russia, Iran, and Canada, Algeria is the world's 5th largest gas producer. You're fucked, Europe. So again, after United States, Russia, Iran, and Canada, Algeria is the world's 5th largest gas producer, with an average of 982,000 barrels of oil produced daily.
People couldn't see my potential, so I had to show them.
I've run this place for 20 years.
Well, what's going on here? They said the world's 5th largest gas producer, and then you have period over there, with an average of 982,000 barrels of oil produced daily. As of February, the country is also among the top 20 crude oil producers. This country must be rich. Their population must be wealthy, all of them, driving Lamborghinis, Bentleys, and, you know, those kind of cars. Fifth largest gas producer, they should not do anything, just have parties all night, and then almost 1 million barrels of oil produced daily. That is among the top 20 crude oil producers. Wow, these guys, if I don't think the United States will allow Algeria to do what they try to do. There's going to be a little mass protests and some violations of human rights over there all of a sudden in Algeria, if there weren't some religious things, conflicts, and then UN and Russia is far away. So is United States, but it has weasels around. The United States is everywhere. Anyway.
Yeah, you know, and that's what happens. Like, unfortunately, when a country does decide to go its own way, when it decides not to be a part of the status quo, all of a sudden you hear about, oh, human rights abuses and things like that. And, you know, I'm going to be honest with you. Western women are kind of like a micronism of what the United States does. Like, for example, like for me, I'll say it that, you know, I wouldn't want a woman who slept around like with like 50 guys, 100 guys. Like, what the hell am I going to do with that? You know, she's a 304. I'll be looked at as a misogynist. Oh, this guy has toxic masculinity and things like that. So when you decide that you want to do something that isn't that actually is normal, but it's not looked at as normal here, then you will be under scrutiny for doing it. I'll give you a perfect example that you know what I mean, like with these countries that, for example, want to join BRICS, they want to do these things because they're trying to benefit themselves. You know, they're trying to benefit the lot, and they're not trying to just benefit their own thing. They're trying to benefit also their citizens, I would hope.
It says Sonatrach, Algeria's state-owned oil firm, produces, refines, transports, and sells petroleum products. So it got the whole circle covered. Now that's what I'm talking about. When you do something, do it well. Like Napoleon said, if you want, Bonaparte said, if you want something done well, do it yourself. The same here, do it yourself, the whole thing. So you don't have intermediaries and weasels to say, stop, well, we're going to ask you for something and we place sanctions on you, okay, basically. So this oil firm produces, refines, transports, and sells petroleum products. It is the largest company, not only in Algeria, but also on the African continent. Ooh, so it is the largest country, not only in Algeria, company, right? But also on the African continent. Algeria is currently being explored by the European Union as a potential gas supplier alternative to Russia. I think not. Or if they do, then they will get it, as they will get it, and they will be at Russia's fingertips. And Algeria will sell oil and gas to Europe at a premium price, a little bit below LNG coming from the United States of America. Man, these guys are just, well, they want it. They want this confrontation. They want to solve it now in 2022, 2023 and on. So be it. All we can do is just like a tennis match. Watch. Other than that, understand. And then when they decide to turn off the light, boom, then we go and meet Jesus or whomever. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Man, it's unbelievable. If Algeria goes over there, and it's already has applied for BRICS, these guys lost another player, India. China, Russia, Saudi Arabia wants to go over there, Turkey, Iran is there already. What resources these guys going to have? Canada and United States, basically. What is there any other country with resources in that side? Europe has no resources; it's depleted.
No, and that's the thing. Like, when you really think about it, Europe, like Western Europe, doesn't really have resources. Like, if you go to Spain, right, their imports are mostly food. Like, or their exports are mostly food. Like, if you go to like an ethnic supermarket, like the most things that you see really are just like food. Like, they have just like good food exports, but they don't really have any other like natural resources. You know, that's why, like, for the most part, Spain still maintains hold of one place called I think it's called Seta and Malaya or Malaya or something like that. They still maintain hold of it like it's their own. You know what I mean? And it's in Morocco. But I think the reason why they hold on to it is because there are resources still. You know what I mean? And so that they don't. The thing is, they don't want to be left out of the cold. You know.
With their economies, they can't obviously sustain their economies. United States has a lot, but it has an economy as well, so it can support.
So I don't know if Indonesia has any natural resources, but the fact that they want to join BRICS is quite telling as well. You know what I mean? It's very quite telling that they themselves want to join BRICS too. You know. Now I had no idea that Tajikistan wanted to join BRICS. This was new to me. I did not know they wanted to join. I did not know that Greece wanted to join BRICS as well. When you look at Greece, they actually went belly up. That place was hella bankrupt. It was hella bad. in a few years ago. Now I don't know what their situation is right now, but it was very, very bad. Thailand does too. Syria wants to too. I knew Egypt wanted to join BRICS too. That's the problem with Nigeria and a lot of Africa right now is the darn inflation. I'm gonna be honest, the dollar is inflated right now here. Like, I'm gonna be real with you, okay? You can spend very little money, right? At a grocery store, or you can buy very few items at a grocery store, but the amount of money they cost is crazy. It really is. Because you'll end up spending, for example, you'll end up spending like 100 something dollars for a few items, and it just goes to show you the length of inflation that is happening. Okay. And in return, because of that, it affects the dollar. Okay. Or as a result of that, it affects African currencies that are pegged to the dollar. I don't know if Kenya wants to join BRICS or not. Let's look at this. So you have to keep something in mind. These are former Soviet satellite states. So these former Soviet satellite states, if they join BRICS, then it's kind of like the last leg that the United States can stand on, in a way. And then furthermore, the thing is that when you look at it from the Latin American point of view, the only leg that the United States will have to stand on in that area would probably be like Colombia and possibly Ecuador, because they haven't talked about joining BRICS, you know. Hmm, hmm. And that's what we need to do in Africa overall. And the thing is, when you look at when you look at you know when you look at Western countries and what they do in Africa, they don't promote like diversity of economy. All they want to do is like take one thing and just leave it at that. That's what you mostly see. You know what I mean? And it's crazy. For me, it's weird, you know. It's very, very weird that they only go for they only feel that they need to take one thing, and they don't even try, for example, to help the situation over there so it can be conducive to diversify the economy. For some reason, they don't do it. I don't know why. Now, I have a question for you guys. Like, when have you known like America to really provide jobs in Africa? You know what I mean? And what I mean by jobs, I mean honest jobs. I mean jobs that, that that really um uh, that really give a person dignity. Okay, I don't mean the child labor that they partake in when they're digging up minerals and stuff like that for cell phones and all of that stuff. I don't mean that. Okay, I mean the actual good jobs that people jobs that basically, in essence, jobs that wouldn't require them to leave Africa because the salary is so good. When's the last time America has done that? Or in general, Europe? Again, hypothetically speaking, right? These are emerging economies, okay? They're emerging economies. America probably couldn't join BRICS because it's not emerging economy. Okay, it's already established, you know what I mean? And it's established basically through the the exploitation of other uh it it has the most to gain, you know, in terms of like development and what have you, you know. And so what I want to say too is that what I also want to say too um is that with this whole BRICS situation, it's not even economic situation, it's also political situation that would maybe be put in a better place, you know, because let's be honest, the way that America and these different countries try to import democracy to these places, it doesn't really work out. And then on top of that, right? On top of this, um, with BRICS, maybe they're able to establish true democracy and not the Westminster democracy, which the West presents to be a champion of. And we all know that that's a fallacy in itself. So the fact that they're building, okay, because they could be conventional, right? They could be very conventional and they could just say, okay, well, you know what? We'll keep our currency in a bank. We'll keep we'll also uh we'll also rely on the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. They could easily do that if they want. However, they're coming up with a different system for that. I mean, they're coming up like with a completely different banking system, you know? This is why what I'm saying about this whole BRICS. Now, the thing is, and this needs to be said, neocolonialism is the new world order, okay? BRICS is a counter effect to that new world order, okay? Many people would say that, oh, BRICS is the new world order, but that's not the case at all. It's the Western imperialism that is actually the new world order. Do you see, now let's ask some questions. Do you see BRICS pushing feminism? Do you see BRICS pushing LGBT alphabet soup characters? Do you see BRICS pushing these things? So, the thing is that we have to say is obviously the West is going to try to concern itself with these factors. And the thing is, the reason why the West is concerning itself with um with this factor is the simple fact that it's not involved. That's what it's mad at, you know. And even this Nigerian right here, he's excited. Look at him. So even he is excited that BRICS. And yeah, BRICS, there is going to be the thing is that the thing is that with BRICS, um one thing I noticed is that it doesn't look to impose a culture on Africa or anything, whereas America, it looks to impose a culture, right? So what I want to get at now is this video um about this, because many people are talking about it and there's just opposing viewpoints, because like people are big mad and people are butthurt. The thing is, what I notice is Americans are butthurt about BRICS, because the thing is the average American just really thinks of his country as just the end all and be all, and it really isn't. But let's continue. So again, it goes to my point that you have to change old formulas, okay? When you look at the West, right? The old formula does not work anymore in a lot of cases. Just simply being a good guy, unfortunately, just being a guy who will provide, just being a guy who will like be a gentleman does not work anymore. Okay? These old formulas don't work. So that's why some of us went rogue and went monk mode and decided that our like energy and our currency, not just the money currency, but just the currency of like validation, the currency of attention, that was better in another place, right? So you see it happening in with the BRICS with this new development bank. They didn't put it in a conventional bank, as you see. But let's continue. So the thing is that the United States was not even a superpower in the United States was not even a superpower in before World War II. Okay? That's the whole thing. It only became a superpower in World War II, basically. And even in that situation, right? It it had help, right? But let's continue. And so that's the thing about this situation with BRICS. When you look at the recession that happened at that time, it was all bad for the world. Everybody was affected. And the reason why it happened was it was a domino effect. You have people who I think you have people who could not afford a house, but they were getting loans on houses that they couldn't afford. And so they went belly up on those loans. And then the banks, they had to find a way to like recover its losses. You know what I mean? And that's what really did it in. And I'm going to be honest, when you looked at different countries, it was affected. Now you look at Spain was hit hella hard. Okay. Spain was hit very, very, very hard. Um Italy was hit very, very hard. The only Western European nation that wasn't really hit with the recession was freaking Germany. It still stayed constant throughout that time. Now we get that. I completely get it, bro. But that's what we're trying to solve. We're trying to get away from that. Okay. That's what I'm saying. We're trying to get away from that. All right. We're trying to get away from we're trying to get away from uh that that dependency on um we're trying to get away from that dependency on that. Okay, that's the thing. That's what we're trying to get away from. We're not trying to be dependent on the dollar anymore as a as I want to say as a world like standard. You know, this is what we're trying to get away from. You know, this is what we want. We no longer want that, you know. So I've been on here for around. So let's look at one more video before I go. Of course, people would say that BRICS is already falling apart because they you know they don't want to see it. They don't want to see us win, you know. But let's see what's really happening. So you see that banks are doing this because the thing is, when you sanction countries, as a response to that, sometimes the countries will wage war on you. Okay. And that's what they're doing right now is countries are deciding that, oh, you want to play this game, then what we'll do is we'll just wage war on your we'll just wage war on the dollar then. And I think that's what these nations are starting to do. They're tired of it. They're really tired of this of the status quo. They're tired. So they found an alternative. And the West doesn't like the alternative, but hey, it is what it is. So the thing is about that is, and that's the problem. Okay, that's the problem. This is the problem that America has. They don't want a new financial order. Okay, the reason why they don't want a new financial order is because they wouldn't be in control of it like it is right now. That's the whole thing. You know what I mean? Uh, and so um, this is the reason why that they don't want this to happen. Okay? When you look at it, when you look at the situations, okay? When you look at the situations, you looked at America that it basically controls the economy in terms of the global economy with that dollar. China has the biggest economy in the world, but it still doesn't have the biggest control in the world. You know what I mean? And it's simply trying to change that because America has used this dumb US dollar to try to bully everybody, you know? And also the thing is the US dollar, what they do is they make everybody else dependent on them. You know, that's what happens. So, and this is the thing: United States doesn't have that much gold. Okay, they really don't. So this is what they're afraid of. They're afraid of the fact that because they don't have the gold that they say they do, that they're going to fall into a bad situation. They're going to fall into a rut. Okay, I'm letting you know that right now. Okay, they're afraid of that. They're very afraid. They don't want to fall into that rut, but they will. They brought this upon themselves. That's the problem. They really brought this upon themselves. So the thing is that I want to say about that is the simple fact that I think one day, like, someone decided that they just decided, why not challenge the dollar? You know, because maybe people were afraid before and they were like, we can't do it. You know, there's just no way to do it. But they decided that we're going to try anyway, you know? So I want something to keep I want you to keep in mind with something. Like, how are they going to pay that money back? And I'm wondering, is the United States just I really wonder I'm really wondering if the United States is just uh creating money out of thin air, to pay this back, because I'm wondering I'm really wondering, like, yo, like, how are they going to really do it? How are they going to really pay this back? It's weird to me. Like, uh it- it- because if you're donating 60 billion, right? Then the question remains, like, okay, how are you going to pay it back? And how does that 60 million affect the economy, affect America? And also, how is it going to affect Americans, because those are their tax dollars. And you know what? I have a theory, and this could be a bad theory. But one thing I noticed is that the tax returns were not really that big this year. They really weren't. The tax returns were lightweight small, man. And I'm starting to think the reason why those tax returns were small was because they had to pay back um they had to pay back or they had to try to consolidate um the amount of debt that they have incurred. Okay? And I'm of the opinion that they couldn't even afford to pay back our tax dollars because of this war. That's what I think. So I'm gonna end on that, but I want to end on this note because I think it kind of um explains like what is going on really, I just want to end on this note just real quick. So this video game is Tekken 4. It was one of my favorite video games, okay? It's very very like I always liked this game. um it was something that was very popular to me. um but you know um but what I will say is that it I have long since stopped playing it, but I may get the new one. But one of the main characters, right? One of the main characters was a guy by the name of Kazuya, and he had a rough time. His dad like did him dirty and things like that, but he ended up coming back and just like messing stuff up. But there's some quotes that he said in this thing that I want to end on because I am optimistic about what is to happen, you know. But let's continue. So pretend like he's one of my favorite characters, but pretend uh like pretend like that guy with the gray hair, pretend like he's the United States, and then pretend like the guy who's about to beat up the guy, beat up these guys, pretend that he is African, emerging nations, basically. But let's continue. So he said they thought I was out of the game. That's what they said. And that's the thing about America. America has always counted the third world out of the game. You know, they always have. They've always taken us lightly and things like that. And they've always thought that they can use us. But something is happening. He said, but I'm holding the cards now. And that's how we have to think in the third world. We have to think that we are holding the cards now. Okay. It's appropriate to think in that way. We shouldn't think in a way of like being docile or something like that. We have to think of in a way of like, yo, we hold the cards and we have the things that you want. Okay? And it has to be something like we're not going to just give them to you like so easily. That's how we have to think. Okay? Otherwise, the same things are going to just repeat themselves over and over again. Well, let's continue. So he said, I'll get everything back. So this is what we have to do as Africans. We have to get everything back. We have to get our resources back. We have to get everything back. And I think BRICS is in the right direction. Enough of the westernization of Africa. Enough is enough already. But anyhow, off until the next one. Fula signing out. Njarama.